The story begins with an elite chef facing a challenge that could change her life. In a high-level competition, the prize isn't just any medal. It's becoming head chef of a 3-Michelin-star French restaurant. The atmosphere burns with tension, cameras catch every gesture, and the clocks race against them. Everything goes according to plan until the unthinkable happens. Her range won't light with 5 minutes left to plate. Everyone else finishes without a hitch. She, instead, improvises boldly. She surveys the ingredients, grabs a handful of straw, arranges it inside a pot, and builds a small, controlled fire. An assistant warns her that's not allowed, but the judges decide to watch before cutting short the inspiration. Everyone stares in astonishment. Without losing focus, she finishes searing the last of the meat and plates with a steady hand. She reaches the judges' table just in time. The judges begin tasting with stern faces. Several previous dishes, though correct, hadn't moved them. When it's the turn of the contestant who lit a campfire in a pot, the panel's tone changes. Her name is Yun Ji-young, serene beauty, cool head, and hands that understand the exact point. She serves a venison fillet handled with respect for an ancestral technique, a nod to recipes from the Joseon dynasty. The balance surprises, the texture yields gracefully, and the flavor lingers longer than usual, even for difficult palates. After deliberating, they announce what the room already feels. The winner is Yun Ji-young, from that moment the new head chef of the prestigious restaurant. With emotions running high, John Ji-young prepares to return to Korea to see her father. She calls to share the news. He congratulates her with pride and advises her to rest because there will be an eclipse that day. She smiles. She'll be able to see it from the airplane window. Before hanging up, her father asks a special favor. Bring him a book on Joseon-era archives he urgently needs for his research. During the flight, hushed voices fill the cabin. Everyone looks out the windows at the progress of the eclipse. In the midst of that fascinating half-light, a tiny accident with giant consequences occurs. Her seatmate spills coffee and splashes the bag where John Ji-young keeps the book. She hurries to the lavatory to check it. She opens it, leafing through ancient pages, and pauses on a final line that sounds like a promise written for another time. If the beloved is reading these words, they should return to the side of the one who pens this plea. She repeats it without thinking, not imagining that this combination of eclipse and words will trigger something that doesn't belong to her world. The surroundings blur. No matter how she tries to call for help, no one responds. It's as if an invisible membrane separates her from the rest. In seconds, she vanishes from her world and falls into a net. She loses consciousness. When she wakes, the air smells of countryside and the sky looks different. Without knowing it, she is 500 years earlier. In parallel, the story introduces Lee Hyun, a king of intense temperament and refined palate. That day he leads a hunt, despite warnings from his advisor about palace commitments and the risks of moving during an eclipse. Even so, he promises rewards to whoever captures the most deer. What others read as a bad omen, he treats as a challenge. Just as the sky darkens, Ji Haeon spots a fox and follows it. His arrows, loosed with a sure hand, slice through the net trapping Yun Ji-young, accidentally freeing her. Still dazed, she rises in clothing that matches nothing of the era. Alarmed, he follows at a distance. She flees until she's backed against a cliff. In her modern mind, everything struggles to be explained as a filming or a tourist attraction, while the king interprets it through his beliefs. He mistakes her for a female spirit that, according to legend, appears during eclipses to test men. The tension snaps when another arrow, fired from the shadows, strikes the king in the chest. He grasps that betrayal is afoot and plunges into the river with Yun Ji-young. She reacts with emergency reflexes, pulls him from the water, and staunches the bleeding with what little she has. When he opens his eyes, still confused, he tries to eliminate the supposed threat. She disarms him with precise movements, makes clear she's a chef and means no harm. He doesn't believe her and tangles himself in insistent accusations that she's a supernatural being. In the scuffle, an accidental blow knocks him out, and she takes the chance to tie him up. It's not revenge, it's self-protection. When he comes to, Ji Haeon explodes with indignation at finding himself bound and rails at the audacity of treating the sovereign that way. Convinced he's exaggerating, she takes his claim as a tasteless joke. They walk together among the trees. He insists on his identity, points to his emblems, and demands respect. She replies confident that anyone can rent a period costume to tour a palace and take photos. The king's pride is wounded. Trying to reassert power, he lets fall improper words and ends up with another blow that snuffs out his impulse. A little later, they find a simple house. Ji Haeon recognizes the banner. They are in his hunting grounds, an area where no one should live. Jeon Ji-young recalls what she read in the book about a ruler named Jeonji, known for clearing villages to expand lands and for ruling with a heavy hand, even reserving local women for himself. That image irritates the king, who tries to explain that crown decisions shouldn't be judged without context. She replies coolly that, seen from below, that figure is nothing more than a womanizer with power. As they talk, Jeon Ji-young notices clothes on a line and, without much thought, changes. A noise alerts her and she enters cautiously. From the shadows, a young woman appears and accuses her of wearing someone else's garments. The stranger apologizes and, confused, asks where they are. The young woman's name is Gil Jeom, and she says they're in Gumpio, within the king's hunting grounds. If they're discovered, they could be arrested. Jeon Ji-young is still grasping for reasons to anchor her to the familiar and tries to convince herself this is a live production, a set, an elaborate attraction for tourists. She asks the year. She gets an answer using Joseon's traditional system. The reality check leaves her speechless, though she still resists accepting it. Hunger brings her down to earth. Too many hours have passed without eating. Gil Jeom suggests cooking something and promises to help at dawn. Outside, the king sleeps. They take the opportunity to gather ingredients, and Jeon Ji-young, with the natural ease of her craft, turns the basics into a seductive dish. She tries to offer it to the monarch. Wary, he suspects poison and demands she taste first. Gil Jeom approaches timidly. Tension spikes when the king notices the young woman is living on restricted property. The newcomer invites Gil Jeom to sit, as if the table could belong to all of them for a while. The first bite has backbone. To the king's palate, the heat is excessive and unsettles him for a moment. Gil Jeom also feels the burn, but senses it fades and the flavor is harmonious. Both enjoy it, though he feigns seriousness while his eyes never leave the bowl. Before the dish is finished, she offers him a final spoonful. The gesture awakens an intimate memory in him, an image of his mother when he was a child. When Jeon Ji-young withdraws, the king is left thoughtful, surprised by the force of that recollection. After that improvised meal, the young women go down to the river to wash. Meanwhile, the army finds the king and escorts him back. Before leaving, he orders them to find the woman who dared humiliate him. In the meantime, Jeon Ji-young speaks with Gil Jeom and discovers the house isn't the girl's. It's a hideout to avoid being taken to the palace as a consort. The chef begins to accept that the man in the woods really is the king, though she still resists fully believing it. Luck runs out. Soldiers seize them both and take them to the palace. They're locked up with other women and, during that confinement, Jeon Ji-young finally accepts the scale of her situation. She has leapt across eras. It's hard to breathe thinking that hours earlier she was celebrating a promotion and now she's a prisoner at court. They're arranged by age. She and Gil Jeom join the 27-year-old group. The king's guards find only Jeon Ji-young's hair tie floating in the river. They conclude she was transported to the palace, perhaps under the governor's watch. She is sent to the kitchens, and fascination floods her eyes. The architecture, the hearths, the vessels, everything looks like a historical drama come to life. The illusion is brief. They're scolded and ordered to cook without questions. A curious disorder reigns. Each woman prepares a different dish with no coordination, and the pantry looks scant and messy. The royal secretary bursts in with demands. Exacting guests will arrive that night, and the banquet must be flawless. Jeon Ji-young asks for information on the diners and calmly notes the lack of supplies. She proposes a practical deal. If they manage a menu worthy of the occasion, grant them their freedom. The governor arrives, surprised by the confidence of this stranger, and agrees. He informs them the visitors are father and son, close to the king and famous for their harsh judgments. If they fail, an extreme punishment awaits. The proposal sounds risky, but it's the only card she has left. The hunt for ingredients begins. She knows a noble expects excellence, not excuses. After reviewing the pantry, she chooses a cut of meat so tough it challenges the knife. The governor eyes her warily and warns from a distance that if it goes wrong, the blame will be hers. In truth, something else worries him. He doesn't know whether his daughter managed to escape in time. The meat resists, but Jeon Ji-young knows her tools. She decides to marinate with seaweed and control the heat with precision, a technique that tenderizes without losing juices. When they taste it, the cooks are astonished at the softness achieved. The aide announces the banquet is ready, and the dishes make their way to the hall. At first glance, the visitors scowl. They interpret the ingredients as a sign of scarcity and consider it a slight to the territory's prosperity. The governor tries to justify and has the responsible parties summoned. Jeon Ji-young arrives convinced she's close to freedom. The illusion dissolves when they point to her and severely accuse her of serving an unworthy banquet deserving of punishment. She notices something crucial. No one has tasted anything. She says so calmly and asks that they try the food before judging. She assures them the dish captures the essence of the place. The secretary calls her insolent. To heighten the pressure, they display the local leader's granddaughter, who failed to escape. Leveraging his influence and cloaking himself in decrees, the secretary proposes a cruel bargain. If the food convinces, they'll leave. If not, they'll take the girl. He even suggests the chef stake her own life on the result. Tension mounts. Confident in her craft, John Ji-young accepts. The men taste and, though they try to hide it, are delighted. They feign disappointment to prop up their plan. The local leader perceives the theater and understands they only want a pretext to take his granddaughter. Caught in the middle, the governor orders an exemplary punishment for the chef. As the punishment is about to be carried out, a voice splits the room. All kneel. The king enters. He recognizes the woman from the forest and is curious about the food that threw the hall into turmoil. Seeing him, she fully grasps the danger. The monarch forestalls immediate sanctions and asks that John Ji-young taste first. Then, in a calculated gesture, he brings the spoon to his mouth. The flavor surprises him. In a good way. He wants to know how she achieved it. She explains she used local herbs and careful technique. The king acknowledges that the level far surpasses what he's been served at the palace. He says so cautiously, watching her with eyes that alternate between distrust and fascination. When she, trying to be transparent, states her name, age, and that she comes from another time, the room loses its air. The king can't decide whether he has before him a visionary or someone raving. Even so, John Ji-young nurtures a small hope of freedom. The monarch, instead, orders her confined and taken to the palace at dawn. She recalls that she's about to witness a dark episode that will lead to the downfall of officials involved in the king's mother's death. She understands the night will be long. In confidence with Gil-jiam, she confesses she doesn't belong to this century and wants to go back. Far from mocking her, the young woman believes her, having always felt this woman carried a different air. John Ji-young realizes everything began with the old book in her bag. If there's a way out, it will be there. She just needs to get it back. By candlelight, the king speaks with his friend and chief secretary. With a touch of humor, he decides to free all detainees except John Ji-young and Gil-jiam. As for the leader's granddaughter, he no longer shows interest. That excuse served him to settle old scores. The governor, for his part, chooses to honor his promise to the chef and lets them go. Minutes later, the secretary informs the king of the escape, and the search is ordered. They run through the forest, trying to find the bag. The king catches up with them with his guard. John Ji-young explains, fearful and urgent, that she's looking for a valuable book. The monarch remembers the object and, when he finds it, everything seems resolved. Until he throws it into the ravine. With that gesture, he shuts the only door she saw back home. Desperate, she promises obedience in exchange for another chance. The answer is clear: immediate transfer to the heart of the palace. The grandeur of the courtyards, the pavilions, and the murals leaves John Ji-young speechless. She senses that splendor is also a cage. The queen receives him courteously and, seeing the stranger, asks about the leader's granddaughter. She doesn't get the answer she expects. The king presents the newcomer as a woman of singular talent and fans the rumor that she might be a spirit. The fourth consort watches her with obvious rivalry. That look alone warns the chef she's treading dangerous ground. The king orders the young women housed. Convinced they'll be installed in a suite, the consort rubs her hands. Reality slaps her back. They end up in a prison. Rage drives her to investigate why the monarch shows interest in the newcomer. In the kitchens, rumor swells. There's a woman who can spin gold out of common ingredients. An order interrupts the chatter. They must prepare a dish for Grand Dowager Queen Inju, the monarch's grandmother. That figure harbors resentments toward her grandson, and her name hovers near a tragic past. Frustrated at failing to learn anything about the first meeting between the king and the chef, the consort treats the secretary with disdain. Tired of it, he confides to his father he'd rather see that woman made the king's concubine than keep putting up with the whims of a weak consort. Between the lines, he shows the sovereign's heart isn't indifferent. That night, a masked man breaks into the prison and helps the young women out. They run to a small party arranged by the king. There he introduces Gong Gil, his jester, an astute performer who entertains while handling delicate errands. Gil-jiam is captivated when he reveals himself. John Ji-young recalls legends about kings and comedians. When it ends, the jester receives his pay and a secret mission: Find out who loosed the arrow in the forest. Adrenaline still high, John Ji-young confronts the king and demands an explanation for so many trials. Annoyed, he orders a severe punishment for Giljeom. The chef pleads for mercy and promises not to try to flee. The king softens and halts the punishment. Instead of returning them to their cell, he offers another deal. He wants her to cook for him, and each dish must be different. She accepts on one condition. Giljeom will be her assistant. On the way to the kitchen, John Ji-young allows herself a nostalgic pause. She thinks of her father, the aromas that formed her, and promises her friend she'll work without rest to gain freedom. On arrival, she collides with the wall of the royal cooks. They won't accept a woman cooking for the king. The monarch's order settles the debate, and the kitchen is placed under her command. She decides to bet on venison, a terrain where she feels sure-footed. One of the cooks, offended, scurries off with gossip to the Dowager Queen's household. On hearing the menu includes venison, the old woman grows even angrier. In the chamber, John Ji-young finds the king at rest, and a moment of modesty brings color to her cheeks. She serves with respect. The king tastes and, bite by bite, journeys with his senses. The steak carries him to scenes of the hunt. A pea cream brings him to the calm of green fields. A roast worked with a technique unknown at court amazes him. Tender with memory, he asks that the chef herself feed him, as in his childhood memories. At that moment, the fourth consort tries to enter. Irritated, the king puts off seeing her. It's evident he's beginning to enjoy this company, though he still denies it. In the corridor, the secretary crosses paths with John Ji-young and proposes an alliance to protect her from consort Kong Mak-ju. Cautious, she replies she'll consider it if he finds her lost bag. The consort doesn't abandon her aim. She gathers support at court to demand an exemplary punishment. When everything seems to tilt against the chef, the king surprises everyone and names John Ji-young head of the royal kitchen. Public humiliation pushes the consort toward the Dowager Queen. With poisoned words, she sows doubts. She recalls the arrow in the forest and the girl's uncertain origins. To cap it off, she suggests a cooking contest to prove her talent and offers to organize it. John Ji-young and Giljeom are finally installed in fitting quarters. They celebrate quietly. The cooks, meanwhile, plot to sabotage her. The next day, they spoil ingredients and damage knives. Anticipating the move, the chef has informed the king and decides to direct without cooking. If they fail, there will be consequences for them. The Dowager Queen summons her to announce the contest. She will compete against 2 royal cooks and, if she loses, a brutal penalty will be applied, losing an arm for deceiving the king. She understands the consort is behind it. Warned, the monarch storms in and levels the field. If she falls, the penalty is carried out. If the men lose, they pay as well. In his heart, he wants her triumph. The challenge centers on filial devotion, and the time limit is 2 hours. John Ji-young thinks of the food of her childhood. Tofu, doenjang, simple soups her father made. She runs for ingredients, but her rivals hoard the best. She finds spinach, not on the official list, and decides to use it thinking of the Dowager Queen's health. A eunuch sympathetic to her cause gets her the missing doenjang. While they're already boiling, she's only now kneading. She recalls a comment from the eunuch that suggests a direction and adjusts her plan. With the clock against them, John Ji-young sends Giljeom out. On the way back, a servant of the consort tries to stop her with violence. Gong Gil appears like a protective shadow and allows the ingredient to arrive in time. In the kitchen, more than one person is surprised to see her add spinach. The consort hints it might upset the queen's stomach. Fed up, the king defends creative freedom and reminds everyone the contest was born to persecute her. Presentations arrive. The first serves fish with dumplings, correct but soulless. The second offers tofu pancake in broth. Tasty, though it misses the theme. When Yun Ji-young's dish arrives, its simple appearance raises doubts. She asks them to taste. As the spoon reaches their mouths, faces change. For an instant, the chef fears she hasn't moved them. Then she sees the king smile. He recognizes a secret detail. On tasting it, the Dowager Queen breaks into tears. The flavor carries her back to a memory of her own mother. There lies the spirit of devotion, not in ostentation, but in living memory. It remains to decide the loser's punishment. Tools are brought to carry out the sentence. John Ji-young pleads for mercy and argues that, for a cook, the arms are their trade and their life. She asks that the years they've served be considered. At first, the king refuses. The Dowager Queen admits she staged the challenge to teach a lesson and asks for moderation. With several voices interceding, the monarch commutes the sentence. The cooks will be demoted to apprentices under Yun Ji-young's guidance. The contest ends, and the new chief earns more than a title. She gains a place in the kitchen and a respect no longer rooted in fear. In the kitchen, one rival shows gratitude, the other harbors his pride. The king turns to the consort and confronts her for staging the contest and spreading rumors. She tries to justify herself. He cuts the discussion short and withdraws. Uneasy, the eunuch alerts the kitchen that the king is agitated and they should prepare something to soothe him. John Ji-young decides on a bowl of noodles with doenjang paste, worked with small twists that change its character. In the chamber, the king dismisses everyone and keeps only her, whom he recognizes by her hair ribbon. Thinking she's repeating the contest dish, he grows angry. She explains she isn't. It's a different construction. He tastes and yields to the flavor. Intrigued, he asks about its origin. She mentions the book Mangle Rock. She explains that if she can recover her bag, she could show him. He then wants to know his fate. Prudently, she limits herself to suggesting he tend to his health and mistrust his circle during that year. After that night, the king opens a notebook to write, inspired by the name she keeps repeating. Shortly thereafter, a blow fells him. The person who was going to deliver proof about his mother's death has been silenced. Sadness pushes him to drink. The eunuch runs to fetch John Ji-young to attend to him. She finds him glassy-eyed and openly hurting. She prepares something to ease the hangover and offers calm in the form of broth. In that tender state, the king breaks the distance and kisses her. As a prologue to that first boldness, it's worth pausing on the contest scene. The chef didn't just ignite straw inside a pot. She also calculated airflow, controlled the smoke to avoid setting off alarms, and moved her pan with a serenity that revealed years of discipline. When the producer came over to warn that solution wasn't contemplated, she didn't fluster. She calmly explained that fire is the same element that honors any kitchen and that she was willing to accept the judge's decision. But the judges, far from punishing creativity, chose to judge the result. The dish spoke for her. Landing in Joseon wasn't only geographic, it was sensorial. The smell of wood smoke, voices without microphones, the raw sunlight with no filters, the different weight of clothing. Metals sounded duller, wood creaked differently, and the silence between phrases occupied more space than in her time. Not even the water ran the same. It had a denser shine. Later, when the palace kitchen came under her command, her leadership showed in small gestures. Before asking, she demonstrated. She washed, cut, and organized stations. She taught them to respect resting times, to salt from high, to taste at every step. She didn't raise her voice. It was enough for her knife to set a rhythm for the brigade to fall in line. Even those who eyed her warily ended up copying her stance. The kitchen, which hours earlier had felt like a chaotic square, became a workshop with invisible music. The final gesture, that unexpected kiss, had no fanfare. There was no music, no applause, no proclamations. It was a brief movement between two people who, from opposite sides of time, found a resting point. She didn't know what to do with that crossed line. Neither did he. The only clear thing is that, from that instant, nothing in the palace could ignore the presence of the woman who cooks memories. End of the drama.